So, you want to own a laundromat. Good news. There are roughly 29,000 of them scattered across the United States. They sell a service that every renter, every apartment dweller, and every person with a broken washing machine needs, with complete predictability. People will always have dirty clothes. The machines take quarters and dollar bills. It looks like the last honest cash business left in America. It sounds like the safest investment in the world. It is not. The fantasy is simple. You buy the machines, you watch the coins pile up, and you drive to the bank. A recession-proof, all-cash, semi-absentee business. But here is the problem. The money you see in the machines is not yours. Not yet. Before you take a single dollar home, a silent partner takes their cut. And that partner is not a franchisor or a lender. It is the water company. The visible business brings customers in with brightly lit signs and rows of stainless steel washers. The hidden mechanism decides whether you survive. And that mechanism is buried in the concrete floor and inside the monthly utility bill that arrives like clockwork. A bill that can easily exceed your rent. A bill you have zero power to negotiate. Before you start counting the quarters, you need to understand something. A laundromat is not a coin business. It is a utility arbitrage wrapped in an infrastructure trap. And the first gate is not the price of the machines. The first gate is the water bill. A typical 2,000 square foot laundromat can consume over 100,000 gallons of water every single month. In some markets, the combined water and sewer rate exceeds $12 per 1,000 gallons. That means before you pay rent, before you pay employees, before you service a single machine, the water company can take over $1,200 from your gross revenue. Every month, predictably, unavoidably. And here is where the fantasy breaks. You do not control that cost. The utility commission sets the rates. The city owns the pipes. You are simply the middleman converting water into clean clothes and hoping the spread between what customers pay and what the utility charges leaves enough to survive. The laundromat looks simple from the street. Rows of machines, folding tables, a change machine in the corner. But the real business is a utility arbitrage wrapped in a maintenance liability. You are not selling washing. You are buying water, gas, and electricity at retail rates and reselling them as a service inside a building you probably do not even own. Before you write a check for $200,000 or $300,000 or whatever the listing price says, you need to understand that money is only the first problem. The real question is whether you are even allowed to buy the one that makes money. And that question has nothing to do with your bank account. You decide to buy one anyway. You have the cash, or at least the down payment. What does the entry ticket look like? A decent laundromat in a stable neighborhood will list somewhere between $200,000 and $500,000. That is the asking price. But the asking price is not the cost. The cost is what you need in liquid capital just to get the keys. Most buyers use a small business administration loan, specifically the SBA 7A program. These loans require a down payment of 20 to 30%. On a $300,000 store, that means writing a check for $60,000 to $90,000 before you even walk through the door. And that is just the down payment. The bank will also want to see working capital. They want proof you can survive the first 6 months. CoinFloat alone can tie up $5,000 to $10,000 just sitting in the change machine and the washers. Then there is the parts inventory: belts, hoses, timers, drain valves. A new owner quickly learns that Speed Queen and Dexter machines do not break during business hours. They break on Sunday night when the store is full and the nearest parts distributor is closed. The all-in cash requirement before you collect your first quarter is closer to $100,000, and that assumes the bank even approves the loan. Here is the strange part. Banks do not love laundromats. They are cash-heavy businesses with unpredictable repair costs. The loan officer will ask for 3 years of tax returns from the previous owner. They will scrutinize the utility bills. They will want a personal guarantee backed by your house or your retirement account. Having the money is not the problem. Convincing a lender that a room full of aging machines and a lease that expires in 4 years is good collateral. That is the problem. But even if the bank says yes, you still have to find a store worth buying. And this is where the access problem gets strange. The good laundromats rarely hit the public market. They trade hands quietly between owners who know each other through distributor relationships. The technician who services the Speed Queen machines knows which owner is retiring, which store is struggling, and which lease is about to become a problem. He knows 6 months before any listing hits the open market. The stores you see publicly listed are often the ones with expiring leases, aging equipment, or utility bills that already exceed 25% of gross revenue. The seller is not retiring. The seller is escaping. And they are hoping you do not know how to read a water bill. There is a broker named Robert Renteria who specializes in laundromat transactions in Southern California. He has said publicly that maybe 1 in 20 listings represents a genuinely healthy business. The other 19 are distressed sales dressed up with fresh paint and a new folding table. The seller will show you the coin drop. They will not show you the sewer lateral inspection report. They will not mention that 3 of the 20-pound washers need new bearings at a cost of $2,000 each. The real entry barrier is not the down payment. It is access to information. It is knowing which distributor to call. It is understanding that the asking price is a lie. The real cost is the check you write 6 months after closing when the deferred maintenance comes due and the utility rates jump again. And you realize the previous owner was not selling a business. They were selling a problem. Assume you found a store. The bank approved the loan. You signed the papers and the keys are in your hand. What do you actually own? You own the machines. You own the change machine. You own the folding tables and the carts and the security cameras. You own the operating company. But here is the strange part. In the majority of laundromat transactions, you do not own the building. You do not own the land. You own a leasehold interest in a commercial space that someone else controls. And that lease is the most dangerous document you will ever sign. Most laundromat leases are what the industry calls triple net. That means you, as the tenant, pay the base rent, plus property taxes, plus building insurance, plus all maintenance on the structure. The roof leaks, your problem. The parking lot cracks, your problem. The heating and ventilation system fails, your problem. The landlord collects the rent and does almost nothing in return. But the real control problem is not the maintenance. It is the renewal. A typical laundromat lease runs 10 years with options to extend. If the landlord decides not to renew at the end of the term, you lose everything. The machines are bolted to the floor and plumbed into the walls. Moving them costs more than they are worth. You cannot relocate a laundromat. The gas lines, the water supply, the drain system, the reinforced concrete pads, all of it is permanently fixed to a building you do not own. Think about what that means in practice. You spend $250,000 buying the business. You spend 5 years building the customer base. The store is finally generating real cash flow. And then the landlord sends a letter. The lease is up. The new rent is double what you were paying. Or the landlord has decided to sell the building to a developer who wants to put in a yoga studio. You have zero leverage. The machines cannot be moved. The customers will not follow you to a new location. The business is worth exactly whatever the landlord decides it is worth on renewal day. There is a case in Chicago from 2018. A laundromat owner named David Choi had operated the same storefront in the Rogers Park neighborhood for over 15 years. The building sold to a new owner. The new landlord refused to renew the lease. Choi had to liquidate 40 washers and 30 dryers at auction. He recovered maybe 15 cents on the dollar. The business itself was profitable. The location was irreplaceable. But the control of the real estate destroyed everything. This is why the smartest laundromat buyers refuse to even look at a deal unless the real estate is included. They want the deed. They want the dirt. They understand that the machines are just appliances. The actual asset is the concrete pad with the gas and water hookups in a neighborhood where renters do not have in-unit laundry. Everything else can be replaced. The location cannot, and the location belongs to whoever owns the building. Assume you did it the smart way. You bought the building along with the business. The deed is in your name. The landlord cannot destroy you. Now the real math begins. And this is where the fantasy of passive income collides with the reality of operating a utility-dependent cash business. A well-run laundromat in a decent market can generate roughly $400,000 a year in gross revenue. That is the coin drop, plus the bill acceptor money, plus the card payments. It sounds like a machine, $400,000 flowing through those machines every 12 months. But here's the problem. The top-line number is not your money. It is the customer's money passing through your equipment on its way to the utility company, the gas supplier, the insurance carrier, the equipment lender, and the tax collector. The first subtraction is utilities. Water, sewer, gas, and electricity will consume between 20 and 30% of gross revenue. On $400,000, that is $80,000 to $120,000 gone before you do anything else. The water alone can cost $40,000 a year in a market with high municipal rates. You are not selling soap, you are reselling water and heat, and you buy those commodities at retail prices with no volume discount. Next comes rent. Even if you own the building, you should charge yourself market rent, because the real estate and the operating business are separate assets. If you lease the space, the rent is a real check you write every month. A typical 2,000 square foot laundromat space might cost $3,000 to $5,000 a month. That is another $36,000 to $60,000 annually. Add property taxes and building insurance under a triple net lease, and you can add another $10,000 to $15,000. Then comes payroll. Even a mostly unattended laundromat needs an attendant for 30 to 40 hours a week. Someone has to clean the lint screens, mop the floors, empty the trash, and handle the customer who put too much soap in the front loader and flooded the aisle. At $15 to $18 an hour, that is roughly $30,000 a year. Add payroll taxes and workers' compensation insurance, and the real cost is closer to $35,000. Now subtract the debt service. You finance the purchase with an SBA loan. On a $300,000 loan at 7% over 10 years, the monthly payment is roughly $3,500. That is $42,000 annually. The bank gets paid before you do, every single month. Then there is the maintenance budget. Laundromat machines run hundreds of cycles per week. Belts snap, bearings wear out, water valves fail, circuit boards fry. The industry rule of thumb is to budget 3 to 5% of gross revenue for repairs and maintenance. On $400,000, that is $12,000 to $20,000, and that is just routine maintenance. It does not include replacing a machine that finally dies. A new 20-pound front-load washer from Speed Queen or Dexter costs between $4,000 and $7,000. A stack dryer runs $3,000 to $5,000. If 3 machines fail in the same year, your maintenance budget is destroyed. Now subtract credit card processing fees. If 30% of your customers pay with cards instead of coins, and the processor charges 2.6% plus 10 cents per transaction, you lose another $3,000 to $4,000 annually. At this point, the $400,000 revenue stream has been carved down to something much smaller. Subtract all these costs, and the owner might be looking at $60,000 to $80,000 in net operating income before paying themselves. Before income taxes. That is a 15 to 20% margin on a business that requires constant oversight, physical labor, and the ever-present risk that a major utility rate increase wipes out half your profit in a single billing cycle. That is when you realize you do not own a business. You own a job paying the water company. If the wash cycle barely breaks even after utilities, where does the actual profit come from? The answer is hiding in plain sight at the back of the store. The dryers. And inside a small vending machine mounted on the wall. The dryer is the hidden profit center of the laundromat. Unlike a washing machine, a dryer does not consume water or sewer capacity. It runs on natural gas and a small amount of electricity. The cost per cycle is dramatically lower. A typical 30-pound dryer cycle might cost the owner 40 to 60 cents in gas and electricity. The customer pays $2 or $2.50 for that same cycle. That is a gross margin of 75 to 80%. Compare that to the washer, where the water and sewer costs alone can consume 40 to 50% of the vend price before you even account for gas, electricity, and soap. The math is brutal and clear. The washing machines exist to get the clothes wet and clean. That is the service that brings customers through the door. But the dryers are where the actual profit lives. A store with 40 washers and 30 dryers might generate more net profit from the 30 dryers than from all 40 washers combined. The wash cycle is the bait. The dryer is the business. And then there is the soap vending machine. A small box on the wall selling single-load detergent packets, fabric softener, and dryer sheets. The margins here are extraordinary. A packet of detergent that costs the owner 25 cents wholesale sells for $1. That is a 75% margin. Fabric softener sheets cost a nickel each and sell for 50 cents. The soap vending machine in a busy store can generate $1,500 to $2,000 a month in pure profit. That is $18,000 to $24,000 a year, falling straight to the bottom line. Then there is the wash-dry-fold service. This is where you wash, dry, and fold the customer's laundry for them. They drop it off in the morning and pick it up in the afternoon. The pricing is typically $1.50 to $2 per pound. The cost to you is water, gas, electricity, and labor. If you pay an attendant $15 an hour and they can process 30 pounds of laundry in that hour, your labor cost is 50 cents per pound. Add 20 cents for utilities and supplies. You are making a gross profit of 80 cents to $1.30 per pound. A busy store doing 200 pounds of wash-dry-fold per day generates an additional $160 to $260 in daily gross profit. That is roughly $60,000 to $90,000 a year from a service that requires no additional machines, just labor and the same washers and dryers already sitting there. This is the second hidden profit center. The customer thinks they are paying for convenience. The owner knows they are paying for the excess capacity of machines that would otherwise sit idle between the morning and evening rush. But here is the strange part. The wash-dry-fold service also reveals the hidden loss center, employee theft. When customers drop off bags of laundry with cash tucked in the pockets, and the attendant finds it while loading the washer, that money can disappear. Loose change, forgotten bills, the occasional watch or piece of jewelry. The industry calls it the pocket find. And if you do not have a clear policy and cameras watching the sorting table, your employees will pocket more than just the laundry. The Coin Laundry Association estimates that unattended losses from employee theft and skimming can quietly drain $5,000 to $10,000 a year from a store. That is a hidden loss center, hiding inside your hidden profit center. This is not theory. In 2021, a laundromat owner in Indianapolis learned exactly how fragile the economics can be when a single regulatory mandate erased 2 years of profit. The owner had purchased a 1,500-square-foot store in a working-class neighborhood 3 years earlier. The purchase price was $180,000. The store had 22 washers and 18 dryers. Gross revenue was roughly $280,000 annually. After utilities, rent, payroll, and loan payments, the owner was clearing about $35,000 a year. Not a fortune, but a living. And the building came with the deal, so there was no landlord risk. Then the city announced a new sewer discharge requirement. The local water treatment plant had been overwhelmed by microplastics and lint from commercial laundries. The solution was a mandate that every laundromat install a lint interceptor system capable of capturing particles smaller than 1 millimeter. The cost to retrofit the store was $52,000. That included the interceptor tank, the excavation, the plumbing modifications, the permits, and the engineering report. The owner had no choice. The city gave laundromats 18 months to comply or face fines of $500 per day. The $52,000 bill was more than the store's entire annual net profit. The owner had to take out a second loan, secured against the building, at 8% interest. The monthly payments on that new debt added $640. That single regulatory change turned a $35,000 annual profit into a $27,000 annual profit. It effectively erased 2 years of the owner's take-home pay. And the lint interceptor added nothing to revenue. Customers did not pay more because the drain had a new filter. The mandate was pure cost, with zero pricing power to offset it. This is not a hypothetical. This is a single repair that cost more than the store's annual profit. And the Indianapolis case is not unique. In 2019, a laundromat owner in Portland, Oregon, faced a similar shock when the city revised its backflow prevention codes. The new rules required a reduced pressure zone valve assembly on every commercial washing machine supply line. The cost per machine was $400. With 30 machines, the bill hit $12,000, plus installation, plus the plumbing permit, plus the required annual testing certification at $150 per valve per year. That added another $4,500 in recurring annual costs. Forever. The owner had purchased the store for $220,000 2 years earlier. The net profit before the mandate was roughly $40,000. After the mandate, the annual certification costs alone consumed more than 11% of the owner's take-home pay. And again, customers did not pay a penny more. The wash cycle cost the same $2.50 it always had. The backflow preventer is invisible to the customer. It does not clean clothes faster. It does not make the store smell better. It simply satisfies a regulation written by engineers at the Water Bureau who have never signed a commercial lease or met a payroll. These cases expose the fundamental vulnerability of the laundromat business model. Your costs are regulated. Your prices are constrained by the apartment complex down the street, with its own laundry room charging $1.50 per load. You are squeezed between a utility monopoly that sets your input costs and a competitive market that sets your output prices. And when the regulator adds a new mandate, you cannot pass the cost through. You eat it, every dollar. The most dangerous part of your laundromat is the concrete floor you are standing on. Beneath that floor runs a sewer lateral, a pipe, typically 6 inches in diameter, that connects your building to the municipal sewer main. In most jurisdictions, you own that pipe. From the building to the street, every inch of it. If that lateral cracks, collapses, or gets invaded by tree roots, the repair bill belongs to you, not the city, not the previous owner. You. And a sewer lateral replacement is not a plumbing call. It requires excavation, heavy equipment, street closure permits. The cost can range from $15,000 to $50,000, depending on depth, soil conditions, and whether the lateral runs under a public roadway. The store closes for a week or more. Revenue goes to zero. And your business insurance policy almost certainly excludes sewer lateral damage. That exclusion is buried in the fine print on page 43 of a policy you signed without reading every word. But the sewer lateral is only the visible underground risk. The invisible risk is the water reclamation regulation that does not exist yet. Municipalities across the country are facing aging water treatment infrastructure. The cost to upgrade these plants runs into the billions. And commercial laundries are among the largest industrial users of municipal water and sewer capacity. A single 2,000-square-foot laundromat can discharge more wastewater than a small apartment building. When the city needs to fund a new treatment plant, the commercial laundry becomes a target. A discharge surcharge, a volumetric fee, a capacity assessment. These are not hypotheticals. They are line items in water district budgets from Phoenix to Philadelphia. In 2022, the city of Denver proposed a commercial laundry wastewater surcharge of $4.80 per 1,000 gallons. For a store using 120,000 gallons per month, that is an additional $576 monthly, nearly $7,000 a year. The proposal eventually stalled after industry lobbying, but the mechanism is now visible. The water district knows who the heavy users are, and the heavy users have no political constituency. But the sewer lateral and the water surcharge are not even the worst-case scenario. The worst-case scenario is the environmental lien. If a previous owner, or even a tenant before you bought the building, dumped dry cleaning solvents or industrial degreasers into the floor drain, those chemicals can migrate through the concrete and into the soil beneath the slab. You will not know. There is no smell, no visible stain. The contamination sits there quietly for decades. Then you try to sell the property. The buyer's lender orders a Phase 1 environmental assessment. The assessor finds the historical dry cleaning operation 3 doors down from the 1970s. That triggers a Phase 2 assessment. Soil borings, groundwater monitoring wells. The lab results come back with tetrachloroethylene above state action levels. The sale collapses. The lender redlines the property. And you are now the owner of a building that cannot be sold, cannot be financed, and cannot be walked away from because the environmental liability attaches to the deed, not the owner. You can close the laundromat. You can board up the windows. You still own the contamination. The cleanup cost can exceed the value of the building by a factor of 3 or 4. This is not abstract. In 2018, a laundromat owner in Santa Monica, California, discovered a perchloroethylene plume migrating from a former dry cleaner that had operated in the same strip mall 40 years earlier. The laundromat itself had never used the chemical. It did not matter. The plume had migrated under the slab. The Regional Water Quality Control Board named the current property owner as a responsible party. The remediation estimate was $480,000. The laundromat was worth maybe $300,000. The owner filed for bankruptcy protection 6 months later. The machines were auctioned. The building sat vacant. The liability survived the bankruptcy because environmental cleanup obligations are not dischargeable in most circuits. When you buy a laundromat, you are not just buying a business. You are buying the geological history of every business that ever occupied that square of dirt. And the most dangerous part is not the wash cycle. It is the concrete floor you are standing on. Assume you have survived the utility bills, the lease renewal, the regulatory mandates, and the environmental landmines. You have run the store for 7 years. You are tired. You want out. What does the exit look like? Laundromats are typically valued on a multiple of sellers' discretionary earnings. That is the net profit plus any owner benefits, personal expenses run through the business, and non-cash charges like depreciation. The industry standard multiple is between 2.5 and 3.5 times. Occasionally, a pristine store with owned real estate and new equipment can touch 4 times. But that is rare. If your store generates $80,000 in discretionary earnings, the sale price will land somewhere between $200,000 and $280,000. That sounds reasonable, until you remember what you paid to get in. If you bought the store for $300,000 7 years ago and you sell it for $240,000 today, you have lost $60,000 in nominal value. Adjusted for inflation, the loss is deeper, and you have not yet paid the broker commission. Laundromat business brokers typically charge 10 to 12%. On a $240,000 sale, that is another $24,000 to $28,800 subtracted from your proceeds. But the real exit problem is not the valuation, it is the buyer pool. The number of people with $90,000 in cash, an SBA loan pre-approval, and the willingness to spend 60 hours a week managing a laundromat is vanishingly small. You are not selling to a private equity firm. You are selling to another individual operator. And that operator is going to scrutinize every utility bill, every maintenance record, and every lease clause before they write the check. The due diligence period can stretch 6 to 9 months. Deals collapse at the inspection stage more often than they close. And even if you find a buyer, the lease problem returns with a vengeance. If your lease has fewer than 7 years remaining, the SBA will often refuse to guarantee the buyer's loan. The lender considers a short lease too risky. The buyer cannot get financing. The deal dies. You are left with a profitable business that cannot be sold because the lease clock is ticking too loudly. This forces many owners into a terrible position. They must renegotiate the lease with the landlord before listing the business. The landlord knows exactly why you are calling. They know the buyer's lender requires a long-term lease as a condition of financing. The landlord now holds all the cards. They can demand a rent increase of 20 or 30%. They can demand a personal guarantee from you even after you sell. They can demand a cut of the sale proceeds. The lease renewal becomes a hostage negotiation where you are the hostage and the landlord is both the captor and the only person with a key. Then there is the disruption that no one in the industry wants to discuss openly, the rise of the megamat. These are large-format laundromats with 60 to 80 machines, attended service, drop-off wash-dry fold, commercial accounts, and sometimes a coffee bar or a kids' play area. They are being built by well-capitalized operators who can afford new construction, energy-efficient equipment, and prime locations with drive-through drop-off lanes. A single mega mat opening within a mile of your store can reduce your gross revenue by 20 to 30% within 18 months. Your customers do not leave because your machines are broken. They leave because the new place has brighter lights, faster internet, and a loyalty card program that gives them a free dry cycle after 10 visits. The independent owner with 25 machines and a lease expiring in 4 years cannot compete with that. You cannot afford the build-out. You cannot afford the marketing. You cannot afford the staff. You are competing against a business model designed to outspend you, outlast you, and wait for your lease to expire so they can absorb your customer base without paying a dollar for your goodwill. Owning a laundromat is not owning a coin-operated laundry business. It is owning a utility arbitrage wrapped in a maintenance liability, sitting on top of an environmental time bomb, inside a building you probably do not control, in an industry being consolidated by operators with deeper pockets and newer machines. The visible business is simple. Customers bring dirty clothes. They put quarters in the slot. The machines run. The clothes come out clean. That is what the sign outside says. That is what everyone sees from the street. But the real business is something entirely different. The real business is buying water at the municipal rate and reselling it inside a wash cycle. The real business is purchasing natural gas and converting it into dryer heat at a margin that subsidizes the washers. The real business is collecting quarters and converting them into a net operating income that must survive the utility bill, the equipment loan, the property tax, the insurance premium, and the eventual sewer lateral failure. The real business is maintaining a fleet of 40 industrial machines that run hundreds of cycles per week in a humid, lint-filled environment that destroys bearings, rots hoses, and corrodes circuit boards. And the real risk is not that customers stop doing laundry. People will always need clean clothes. The real risk is that the cost of water rises faster than your ability to raise prices. The real risk is that the landlord decides the building is worth more as a yoga studio than as a laundromat. The real risk is that a city inspector finds a crack in your sewer lateral and condemns the drain system until you write a check for $30,000. The real risk is that the contamination from a dry cleaner that operated 3 doors down in 1972 migrates under your foundation and attaches to your deed forever. The laundromat looks like the simplest business in America, a room full of machines that take quarters and return clean clothes. But the simplicity is an illusion. The complexity is buried in the utility bill, the lease agreement, the concrete floor, and the geological history of the dirt beneath it. You can buy the machines, you can buy the building, you can buy the goodwill and the customer list and the phone number that has been listed in the local directory for 30 years. But you cannot buy control over the water rate. You cannot buy immunity from a sewer lateral collapse. You cannot buy protection from a regulatory mandate that requires a $50,000 lint interceptor. You cannot buy a guarantee that the landlord will renew the lease. You cannot buy a promise that a mega mat will not open a mile away and absorb your customer base with newer machines and a loyalty card program. The laundromat is not a coin business. It is an infrastructure business disguised as a retail service. The real asset is not the washers and dryers. The real asset is the concrete pad with the gas line and the water supply and the drain connection in a neighborhood where renters do not have in-unit laundry. That pad is irreplaceable. Everything else is a depreciating appliance that will eventually break, leak, or become obsolete. If you are still determined to buy one, understand what you are buying. You are buying the right to stand between the utility company and the customer. You are buying the obligation to maintain 40 aging machines in a humid environment that destroys everything it touches. You are buying the liability for whatever is buried under the floor. And you are buying a business whose exit value depends almost entirely on a lease renewal negotiation you cannot control. The quarters in the machine are not your money. They are the utility company's money, the equipment lender's money, the insurance carrier's money, and the landlord's money passing through your hands. What remains is the narrow spread between what customers pay to wash their clothes and what the system allows you to keep. That spread is the business. And it is thinner than it looks from the street.